And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, Ryan Metzler here, and today we're going to be taking a look at another Russian game. We're going to be taking a look at the Kingdoms of Crusaders, which is a game for 2 players, which will take about 30 to 45 minutes, and is somewhat akin to Battle Line, where players will be placing cards from their hand into specific areas and trying to gain influence over them. So, with that said, why don't we take a look at what comes inside this box, how the game plays, and then I'll give you what my thoughts are on it. So here you can see the setup for a 2-player game of the Kingdoms of Crusaders. The game can play up to 4, but you need 2 sets of the game in order to do so. So I'm just going to show you a 2-player game rather than more players. The game is going to come with 3 different things. One is a deck of cards, and these cards are going to show different banners in the top. You'll see this one has a green, a yellow, and a red banner. And the banners are going to increase in strength from left to right, so in this case red would be the strongest banner. But you'll see other cards may have less or more banners and different ones. So this one has a yellow and a red. And we have just a brown in this case, or just a yellow. And so some cards will be inherently better than others by having either stronger banners or more banners on the card. Each player is going to start the game with 5 cards. And what they're going to do on their turn is they're first going to draw a card from the deck, so they'll have 6 in their hand, and then they'll play one of these cards into any of the segments. So you'll see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections of this area. It's double-sided so that each player can look at it face up, but it's somewhat irrelevant. And you're going to be placing one of your cards into these areas, trying to gain the most influence over it. And obviously you're first going to be comparing the color of banners, but then you're also going to be comparing the number of banners. And there's 3 different types of things you want to look at. You're trying to get pairs, 3s of a kind, or 4s of a kind. And so on your turn you're simply going to place one card into one of these areas. Let's say I place this one here. So I have a green and a red banner there. And then on my opponent's turn they would place a card on the opposite side somewhere in one of these 5 regions. So let's say that they placed a red, yellow, green, and brown over here. Players will keep playing cards until they've played 20 cards, putting 4 cards in each of these regions. And when they've done so, they're going to compare all of the regions to see who has stronger forces in each of these regions. So why don't I set up all 5 regions and then I'll show you the scoring. So here you can see the final condition for the game where each player has played 4 cards in each of 5 spots. You'll note that I rotated these center things so that there's actually 5 spaces for all of the cards. I had them rotated improperly before, but somewhat irrelevant. There's 5 different columns here. So moving from left to right, let's take a look at the scoring. So here we have a condition where each player has 4 of a kind, they have 4 browns. So neither of these players wins on 4 of a kind, which are called regiments. So next they would go and look at 3 of a kinds, and 3 of a kinds are called battalions. So here we can see that the player closer to me has 2 different battalions, a blue and a green. They win this position because the other player has no battalions. So they would score 1 region. The next region we'd look at, we'd first look at regiments. We'd see that the player closer to you has 1 regiment while the player closer to me has none. So in this case, that player takes this area. The third row, you can see that each player has 1 regiment, but one player has a green regiment while the other has a blue. In this case, the higher regiment, the green regiment, is going to win, and the player closer to me will take that area. In the 4th area, you can see that there are no regiments, but there are pairs. One player has a pair of brown and a pair of yellow, while the other player has a pair of green and a pair of red. This one would go to the player who has the higher set of pairs, which would be the player closer to me. Now we can decide at this point that the player closer to me has won because they have taken 1, 2, 3 out of 5 regions, and the game would be won by this player. But to give one final example, let's take a look at the final row. In this case, you have one player who has 3 of a kind, or a battalion, while the other player only has 3 pairs. Even though this player has 3 pairs, it always goes to the higher type of combination, the 3 of a kind, and the player closer to you would win the final spot. So that's the Kingdom of Crusaders, or Kingdoms of Crusaders. And all I can really say is that the game is too simplistic. It tries to be Battle Line, which classic Knizia, you have cards lined up in the center, you have pawns lined up in the center in this case, and you're trying to control the pawns. First person to X pawns wins, or if you get a certain amount of pawns in a row. And this game is the same idea, but without all of the interesting aspects of it. There's no cards to modify how sets are played, or there's no special effects in the game, and there's no special victory condition. You simply play 20 cards, whoever has the most areas wins. So, while a decent enough game, it's just very simple. I don't really think I'd ever play it, and so it's not something that's going to be making my collection. And I probably wouldn't suggest that anybody else go out and add it to theirs.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.